without taking up the entire time on this entire podcast, the amount of desire to now build internally things that otherwise we would procure from third party has been something we've seen a lot happen over the last few months, both with that desire of how quickly we could build the capability, and because it's built within our environment, how much more secure it would be, and following the compliance guardrails that we've got put in place that we have a guarantee for our customers. I would say it's tipped the balance a little bit more at Gusto towards building. Even we have, within our IT organization, a team that's been spun up that is mostly evaluating vendors that we work with to try and see, okay, this might have made sense in a build versus buy situation in the past. Is that now something that we should consider on build going forward? So I would say that's just been a dramatic shift for us over the last few months.
Welcome to the Information Week Podcast. I'm your host, Senior Editor Jean-Pierre Ruth. In this episode, we are looking at AI in regulated spaces. How are organizations tailoring their AI use to comply with their niche guardrails? Some sectors, whether finance to healthcare, may have to weigh additional layers of compliance and good governance before dipping their toes into any kind of new technology. And now that AI is the shiny object in the room, enterprises may have a tricky path to navigate to, on one hand, keeping up with this evolving space, on the other hand, maintaining compliance with the regulatory elements that they need to pay attention to. And for this episode, I'm joined by Mike Tria, CTO for Gusto. Mike, thank you so much for being here today.
Thanks for having me.
And we're also joined by Joshua Foltz, CISO for NerdWallet. Joshua, thank you for being with us.
Glad to be here.
All right, great. Okay, so Mike, Joshua, let's talk about when you are first getting a look at features and capabilities of AI that you're either like destined, or you said destined, but like you're really determined to use or even considering using. What kind of regulatory concerns, considerations, alarms go off in your mind before you decide to okay, well, let's adopt this or try to build this up from the inside? What are the things that come to mind? Mike, if you could start off, and Joshua, get your thoughts too.
Sure. It's a good question, JP. I think, so at Gusto, when we looked at AI tools right at the start, it was both extremely exciting, both in terms of what it could deliver for our customers, building features faster, giving our customers more capabilities like we did with Gus. But on the flip side as well, lots of concerns around risk. Things like data sharing. Gusto, like a lot of regulated companies, are under many forms of compliance, which is a very good thing, honestly, for our customers. It builds trust. So there were no situations where any use of AI was an automatic yes. There were none of that. All of them had to go through very, very strict reviews. To get a little bit more specific, as an example, at Gusto, we've got a large engineering organization, and code needs to get shipped to our production environments. So there can be a temptation to just have code that can automatically be built by AI and then shipped all the way to a production environment. Certainly would be quite fast. We felt that would be extremely unsafe, unreliable, insecure. And so we still require human eyes on anything that goes out into our production environment that comes to our customers, very much for our customers' sake, to ensure that we can, put our stamp of approval on it. We have that sort of situation in terms of AI use across the enterprise in many, many parts of Gusto, both from a security perspective, risk perspective, all over the place. Yeah, so I'd say mix of excitement about the velocity that it can bring for us and capabilities that we couldn't offer, tempered with lots of risk controls, audit trails, candidly, the things you would already expect for enterprise vendors.
Joshua, same question for you. What were some alarms that you were kind of paying attention to before diving in with AI elements?
Sure. Yeah. So in security, we boil almost everything down to this acronym CIA, which stands for confidentiality, availability, and integrity. And so AI, same type of thing. Most of my concerns were around the integrity of the data that AI creates. We've all heard stories about hallucinations and what AI does when it doesn't actually have the knowledge necessary to answer the question or do the task that it's supposed to. And then confidentiality. So anytime we have a centralized system like a neural network that ChatGPT put together, anything like this, how do we make sure that only the right people have access to the right things, right? So role-based access control and basic security functions like that. So similar to Mike's approach over at Gusto, we do a lot of the same things, right? So there's a review of any technology we use. There is an understanding of what this technology is doing. And then there's human checks along the way that add value to what the AI engines have created, and also some head checks to make sure that we're not delivering something publicly or live or to our consumers that's not fully vetted and not something we stand behind.
Gotcha. Speaking of vetting, have you committed like a dedicated vetting process, particularly for any kind of, like, let's say, working on something in-house is one thing, but like if there's like a third-party AI tool that you're like, hey, we might want to make use of that, but you want to take things into consideration, then you have to really, kick those tires before introducing it to your system. Have you like kind of like have a dedicated, like maybe not a team, but like kind of, let's park in this particular place before we make use of a third-party resource?
Oh, sure. Yeah. So we've always had a third-party risk management program where we assess the risk of any third party we integrate with. AI was considerably more dangerous, and for two reasons. One is the capabilities and the speed at which AI can execute, and second is a lot of our vendors, third parties that we work with, they rushed to market with some of their AI capabilities and tools. And so what we did is we took our TPRM program, we added a lot of extra checks to understand how the maturity of their AI. Like, is this something they're playing with? Is this something that's mature and vetted out and a solid process? We understand what they do with our data, how they intermix our data, how they keep our data separate from our competitors, things like that, and whether or not they learn on our data. So quite a few enhancements to our program because of AI.
Yeah, I can add to that as well. I think on our end, I would add +1 to what Joshua said. Similar, we have a third-party risk management system. I would say something we do, and advice I would give to anybody, is kind of divide the world up of these vendors into three. One is has potentially access to your customer data and part of your product offering. So that's essentially the riskiest. For a company like Gusto, obviously, we have HIPAA compliance, which obviously gets passed along to any kind of vendors that we use, which adds to the complexity. So that's the sort of like apply the most rigorous controls there. Second is has potentially access to customer data, but does not drive an experience for the customer, as in AI is not involved in decisioning. That's the second riskiest. And then the third are ones that do not have access to customer data. Candidly, most of the vendors that we've looked at are in that third category. They are productivity enhancers for employees at Gusto to be able to do their jobs better. And we actually, because of AI, the rise of AI, we actually had to add in a lot more controls and barriers internally within Gusto to ensure that, even inadvertently, employees did not have access to customer data, which is something we're pretty proud of. Gotcha.
Are there elements, particularly with third-party AI resources, that might be common to that space that kind of run afoul of those regulatory concerns? Like, this might be common and typical in a lot of third-party AI spaces, but here's a regulator that's like, yeah, that's a no-go. Anything that either of you seen that comes across like that?
Yeah, so one of the obvious ones to us was in the public space. So we're subject to Sarbanes-Oxley, and Sarbanes-Oxley is very concerned about access to data on critical systems. And so ensuring that when we use agentic AI or generative AI, that access is treated as a non-human identity. It's tracked, it's identified, it's logged, and that somebody is held accountable for the actions of each of these AIs, depending on the use case.
Yeah, the only one I would add to that is any system that potentially trains on our data where there's data sharing is something that is generally a no-go outside in some rare exception situations.
Gotcha. All right, so we talked about third-party AI resources. What kind of in-house AI resources have you either considered developing or you're thinking about developing to meet your needs that may or may not, speak to meeting that compliance a little bit better than, what's kind of like, off the shelf?
I can jump on that one. I would say, without taking up the entire time on this entire podcast, the amount of desire to now build internally things that otherwise we would procure from third party has been something we've seen a lot happen over the last few months, both with that desire of how quickly we could build the capability, and because it's built within our environment, how much more secure it would be, and following the compliance guardrails that we've got put in place that we have a guarantee for our customers. I would say it's tipped the balance a little bit more at Gusto towards building. Even we have, within our IT organization, a team that's been spun up that is mostly evaluating vendors that we work with to try and see, okay, this might have made sense in a build versus buy situation in the past. Is that now something that we should consider on build going forward? So I would say that's just been a dramatic shift for us over the last few months.
Yeah, same thing for us. It seems like every vendor is starting to introduce some sort of LLM search within their product. And so lots and lots of review and understanding how they're doing it, but also not a super impressive use of AI in general, right? There's so many capabilities and functions that these tools can do nowadays. And so we found that we have to build a lot of this. The vendor space just simply isn't giving it to us, especially in cybersecurity. And so we're building out a lot of internal functions and features to do these types of things. So for the first time ever, we can release near perfect code, right? Where code is developed and created and checked for security vulnerabilities all before it ever goes to production. We can defend our perimeter in nearly real time, where an attack against us from even a nation state can be instantly responded to and things like that. So there's a lot of really impressive capabilities that we can use, but they all have to be used with caution, right? These are AI is still in its infancy, and we have to keep it in check. And so that's been our approach.
Do you foresee going forward that there will be just kind of a dedicated space to kind of focus on that, or are you seeing that this will become part of your overall kind of production cycle just going forward as everyone just kind of builds up their AI muscles, if you will?
I think it'll be a little bit of both, but the innovations that AI offers just can't be ignored by modern business if you want to compete and stay relevant. And our consumers are expecting a lot more of this too. Like I can't tell you how many times I get on a website or a customer support call and I get like AI 1.0, and it's so frustrating to me that I can't just ask it a question and it can't just answer my question or solve my problem. And so we have to adapt to that. And it's making the world a better place. And there's some issues along the way, but it's kind of a wild ride, honestly.
I like that AI 1.0. I might borrow that, Joshua. I'd say the change that I see happening over the next few months, and this is something I really hope the vendor space catches up with, which is assume that an agent is going to be what is using your software and not a human. And so I've started to see some vendors that have gone down that route, because I think within a large organization, we're starting to have essentially a managed agent platform with agent identity. And then that ultimately will be the tool users and drivers of the work. And so if you have a vendor out there that is just not seeing that, like Joshua mentioned, they offered an LLM search. Great. Can an agent use it? In our situation, I think we're going to start to see more and more of that.
Picking up that, right now, does it seem like the vendors is it the low-hanging fruit that they're pursuing versus understanding what you need, particularly in your niches?
I think that's a majority of it. And then there's also all these startups that are coming out, and they're coming out fast and furious. And there's literally 1,000 startups that do this one thing, and then 1,000 startups that do this next thing. And the development of code and products is rolling out so fast. It's difficult to figure out if any of them are stable and strong and secure and mature and those types of things. And so trying to navigate that space is certainly challenging.
Yeah, I would say they're genuinely trying to solve. A lot of these startups are genuinely solving business problems and trying. I think the situation is that the businesses that they're selling into are also on a learning journey. And so there aren't a lot of proven paths for this. And I think that can be a challenge when you're starting one of those startups. I think the ones that I've seen that do really well take into consideration like the questions that you're asking, JP, around like, how are you, like from the ground up, we've thought about identity and security and reliability and compliance. Like I pay a lot of more attention to those ones in terms of honestly their viability over the long term.
That kind of includes the LLMs themselves. So like Google, as an example, has built out into their studio a whole bunch of security tools and functions and governance functions, whereas Claude, Anthropic, like they're just releasing features and functionality, and trying to secure Claude while in the wild is it's kept my team very busy. Let's just say that.
Gotcha. Well, speaking of keeping things busy, for those who are listening, as opposed to watching, I have got the Ninja Turtles game screen up, which means it is now time for our tabletop exercise, Questionable Ideas. Our tabletop exercise where our panel will serve as interim executives with the fictional company known as Questionable Ideas. While some of the elements of this exercise will be over the top, they do speak to today's episode topic. These scenarios were not shared in advance with our panelists, and they are not responsible for the presence of goblins, kobolds, and gremlins. That is entirely my fault. Once again, to reiterate, some of the elements we'll be seeing in this, goblins represent the pursuit of the newer, faster embrace of technology. Kobolds represent a kind of like more stoic, conservative, let's keep things the way they were, or even go back a few decades in terms of tech perspective. And the gremlins represent a bit of chaos, hitting things, pushing a big red button because, hey, why not? Let's see what happens. Okay, so once again, Joshua, Mike, as the interim executives with this company, you are going to have the same kinds of rights, powers, and authority that you assume to have with your current roles, and then some to deal with the kind of bombastic things that will be happening. Are you ready, gentlemen? Okay. Scenario one. Questionable Ideas wants to leapfrog into financial services and health insurance, and the CEO sees AI as the fastest way in for vetting clients and processing claims. The company still has not replaced its CFO, who got kidnapped a couple of episodes ago. So in the scramble to generate revenue and profit, the goblins introduce an algorithm. They've called it eLeapfrog that seems to choose customers who offer the most lucrative returns for the company, regardless of other customers meeting basic eligibility requirements. The goblins say the training data came from quality databases full of celebrities and Ivy League alumni because they represent the quickest path to ROI for the company. Do you let eLeapfrog continue to run as is?
No. So there's bias concerns here, right? So you need to get into the data. You need to get it better data, more broad data. And then oftentimes you need to train and leverage and make sure that you're not isolating protected groups and things of that nature. So that'd be the first thing we'd fix. But that the idea in general, not too bad, but it's obviously not trained well and not ready for the wild.
Yeah, I would agree. I think the first thing is, for me, a ding in my own performance review on how long I let this happen without shutting it down first. So, yep, that's gotta stop. I think there might be merit in the actual algorithm. The way I would approach this, candidly, any system that can do any kind of even assisted decisioning on AI is always human in the loop first. Like, run an algorithm side by side if you want to, but a human makes decisions. Only in situations where you have both the compliance, the regulatory permission, and the customer trust to potentially even allow an AI to make a decision about something like claims, has to be heavily backed with lots of your own confidence in your own people that can vet the algorithm first.
And that's a really good soundbite there, Mike. Like that, humans make decisions. I think that's boils down to a lot of the things we should put in place with these technologies.
Well, the goblins were hoping that this was going to be their fast path to getting invites to Coachella and using folks from there in the database. Okay, well done on that. Next scenario. After some soul searching by the CEO, eLeapfrog has been put on ice. But Questionable Ideas still needs a system in place to get to scale while also meeting compliance and practice. One morning, the data and security teams come knocking on your doors. Overnight, someone accessed all data resources across the company, its partners, and databases that you can't even identify. At first, it is unclear who compromised your environment until an AI model called Plus Ultra goes online, launched by the Gremlins. It immediately gets to work on customers and claims and seems to work fast, but there's little consistency in how it processes cases or chooses clientele. Your other teams cannot make heads or tails out of this model or its training data, but the Gremlins say to just trust the process. if no one knows how it works, the regulators can't prove it's bad, right? Right? How do you handle this allegedly black box AI they've put in place?
These gremlins. So probably a similar answer to the first one. I would not deploy a model internally. Now, granted, no one really knows how all the models work internally. That's not the point. But we certainly know the inputs you give it and the outputs that they are capable of doing and the actions that you allow them to take. So yes, clearly step one is disabling and turning it off. Quite simply, I care a lot about read actions and write actions. So what is it reading? What capabilities does it have access to? And what are the write actions? What can it change in our system? Can it process claims, make changes, et cetera? I think what matters for a company is being able to carefully dictate what it can do, not necessarily how it works, but what is it capable of doing, and start from that. So again, probably similar to the first one, that would be a stop and understand it. I would also, I think in situations like this, the idea of a surprise system that gets launched already is a breakdown internally around, well, let's engage legal and compliance on this. Let's engage security. I've often found personally, you can actually end up going faster if you have all these parties aligned in the problem that you're trying to solve, because you can come up with novel solutions that might not be a giant black box that solves the problems.
Yeah, so I'm glad the security and data teams brought this to me because they can find where it is and stop it. Obviously, we need to take this thing offline and understand it, re-architect it a little bit. There's some major problems in the way that it's rolling things out. And one is around visibility, right? So if you have an AI system that is performing functions in your environment, you don't know how it's doing it or how it's getting there. From a financial services standpoint, that's unacceptable. The SEC simply won't allow us to make or advise on financial decisions without understanding how we got there. Whether it's AI generated or whether it's human generated, we're accountable for those recommendations that we make. And so we can't let a tool try to violate those rules, even if the regulators can't figure it out, because they'll still fine us and hold us accountable. And the worst part about it is the impact to our consumers if it makes mistakes.
Gotcha. I mean, the gremlins, they did pinky promise that it would work if you just trust the process. But
next time.
they have a habit of grabbing things like EMP bombs that they want to set off because they want to see what happens. So good job on that. All right. Last scenario. At the stroke of midnight, you get alerts on your work phones. The company's databases and systems have been locked down, and not by the security team. As far as security can tell, nothing has been compromised, but everything has come to a halt. Hours later, the kobolds emerge from the data dungeon with an ultimatum. We have instituted the Fortress Maximus protocol. This environment will remain closed to ensure there are no data leaks, no rogue AI, no repeats of prior mistakes. Any AI the company wants to explore will be first tested within this closed environment for 2 years for algorithmic decay. Global compliance is mandatory. Do you let this Fortress Maximus protocol stand?
Not if we hope to have a company in a year or two. So yeah, I understand the mindset here, and safety is always good, and so we need to move forward with trepidation and security and maturity and things like that. But no, certainly not.
Same. I like the approach of let's show some real use cases of using AI that do leverage this data in a compliant and secure way that provide value for customers, and then use that as a nugget and slowly build up from that, as opposed to just lock it all down, or the gremlins approach of use it for everything. The right answer is always in the middle.
You might point the gremlins at the current teams. So.
That's right.
Gotcha. Well, you've definitely found good middle grounds for dealing with the situations that the kobolds, gremlins, and goblins have brought forth to you. So listen, Mike, Joshua, I appreciate you coming on today, showing your expertise and knowledge in dealing with AI in regulated spaces, and also dealing with the scenarios that we had offered for you today. Thank you so much.
Thank you, JP.